Good evening, this is One Black British Woman's Voice, and today I'm going to touch on the subject, which is, can black people be racist? Now, before I jump cut to my main point, I'm going to tell you point blank that no, black people cannot be racist. At the most, they can be prejudiced. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you a number of scenarios, real life scenarios, I think one or two including myself. Then I'm going to illustrate those scenarios using a psychological paradigm, and then I'm going to make my main point. So the first scenario is this. When I was about 9 years of age, we used to live in a white majority neighborhood. It's where my father ran his business. And 2 doors down, there was a perfectly amicable young white boy who I used to, not play with, but we would talk to each other across our fences. We got on doing this for quite a bit until one day he exclaims to all and sundry that he can no longer talk to me because I am black. I then saw him running back into his house, where I saw him being embraced by the white arms of his mother. Well done to motherhood there. However, the point is, this 9-year-old tells me when I am 9 also that he can no longer talk to me because I am black. Interestingly enough, his background was Turkish, which when you come to understand Turkish people a bit more, you'd understand that's probably why they said that. It's probably also the reason why Nelson Mandela refused to accept the Nobel Peace Prize from them, because of their atrocious human rights record. But that's not my point. My point is, at the age of 9, this was an experience of racism that I had. Now, there's another video currently floating around on social media of a young black girl who mournfully recites the moment to her mother that she is told by her white friends that she can no longer play with them. She can no longer play with these white friends because her white friends have told her, you're black and I'm white. And furthermore, I'm not going to go to your birthday party because you're black and I'm white. I'm going to go to my white friend's birthday party. Okay, so these children were 5 years of age. Now, coming back to a story which involves me. About 4 years ago, I visited a vicar's house. Now, I used to be a practicing Christian. I'm not one anymore, but he used to have these home groups, these cell groups. And the thing that I found loosely disturbing about this vicar is that in this home group, this is a collection of 12 or so people that get together to talk about the Bible and to be indoctrinated further. What I found loosely concerning about this home group was that it was all white people, and they were all white people of a type, all same background, all same way of speaking. It was just that type of group where subversively there's some insidious form of racism going on, but you'd like to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And it was central London. And this vicar actually at the time was someone who was going to replace another vicar at a church that I went to. And he had a little daughter, and he'd actually been living in London for quite a few months now. So he was taking over from another vicar, and I think he was just kind of hovering around in the background, watching how vicarship worked before he officially took over the reins. So during that time, of course, he'd ensconced himself within London, had a house in London, his wife and his child was in London, and he had a little daughter who I think maybe was about 2 years old. I can't recall. She was small as she couldn't speak. As far as I'm concerned, that means baby. But she's probably about a 2-year-old baby. And I walked into their house as this newer member, thinking to myself, well, actually, I don't quite like this setup already, but I've been looking for a cell group with which to express my Christianity, and this is the first place that I've been guided to, so I'm going to try and give it a shot. But I felt uncomfortable, and maybe I might have been projecting, I don't know, but I felt uncomfortable because there were no other black people there, and it was central London, so there should have been at least one black person, well, 2 black persons there, myself and this other and another black person. And I greeted this vicar, and everything was nice, and how do you do? And his little 2-year-old daughter came waddling out, took one look at me and stood just staring. Now, sorry, before I go on to another point, actually, this vicar had actually been living in another part of London. So it wasn't his first time in London. Sorry, I hadn't clarified. He had moved to London. I mean, he'd lived in London, but in another part. He'd only moved to this specifically part of London because he was taking over as a vicar from another vicar in the church I used to go to. And this child basically lurched back, was quiet, didn't say anything, no gargles, no me noises. Then, under the instruction of her parents picked her up. I walked up to her, looked at her, said, oh, how cute you are. She looked back, then her arm jutted out, touched my face, dropped her hand, looked at me some more, and just seemed befuddled. And then she started to cry. And I instinctively knew what had happened here. This girl had not come across a black person. This vicar had never had a black person in his house. So I understood the context of what was going on here. She was afraid because she'd never seen anyone of my ilk, my colour. before. And this child would have been about 2 years of age. So are you with me so far? So at 9 years of age, racist experience with a white boy. There's a video clip currently floating around on the internet of a black girl talking about how she was told by her friends that she can no longer be played with. And then I've got this little 2-year-old that can't even speak, who already understands the precepts of race and dislikes it. There is another story, and I can't recall it, but I'm not going to recall that story. I'm just going to give you those 3 stories, 2 of them involving myself and 1 just being something I saw on social media. But the common thread between all these stories is that these white children were children. They were infants, but already they had a prescribed notion of race. Already there was a thin thread of discrimination running through them. One of them being 2 years of old. She can't even formulate language yet, and yet she already understands what discrimination is. Now, I'm going to use a psychological paradigm as an example to further illustrate my point. As you know, the words psychopath and sociopath are sloshing around on social media and have been pretty much abused because everyone thinks everyone's a psychopath these days and even uses it to describe their cat. However, even though the words seem interchangeable on the surface, they have core distinct differences. A psychopath being someone who is born like that, and a sociopath being someone who is made like that. Now, a sociopath is made like that, if you're asking, probably it's because they grew up in a violent household, and in order to achieve survival within that household, they've had to decrease on traits such as empathy, because it's survival of the fittest, and increase in traits such as aggression. So again, just to reiterate, psychopathy, when you're a psychopath, it's because you're born that way, and when you're a sociopath, it's because you were made that way, as a survival of the fittest mechanism to survive in a violent household or to survive in a violent village, anywhere where there was survival of the fittest, where anywhere that necessitated the mentality of survival of the fittest, therefore you'll find psychopathy growing. Now, why am I using this as a point to illustrate my point? Well, if you notice, as I said earlier on, the racists, the aggressors, were white children. Every indication, therefore, that these children have not only formulated an opinion at an early age when they should be thinking about easy bake ovens and plasticine cupcakes, not only have they formulated sinister discrimination traits when they should be concentrating on childlike things, but they were white young children, as young as 2. Now, I can't vouch for the 2-year-old, and if you look on the internet, what you'll also find, sorry, to back up my point further, is an article in the Express newspaper from 2017 where there is an alarming rise in police being called out to chastise racist children. So there's a rise in children as young as 3, going on 4, 5, 6, whatever, who have been spouting off racist rhetoric, Islamophobic rhetoric and homophobic rhetoric. And when you looked at the examples given in the Express newspaper of what children were doing this, again, it was white children. Therefore, sorry, I'll go back to my point earlier on. Psychopaths are born, sociopaths are made. My argument as to why black people cannot be racist, at best they can be prejudiced, is because these stories clearly illustrate that almost from conception, these children are racist. It is inherent within their gene pool. They were probably ruminating on their superiority complex before they even descended down the vaginal canal. And when they emerged, even if they weren't racist, you'll have fictional histories as recited by social media, or fictional achievements as recited by a white media, and nonsense logic from degenerate white parents reinforcing whatever little teeny notion they might have had that they are superior in some way, or exacerbating the notion that they are superior in some way. So this is my point, and I keep saying this is my point, but again, this is my point. Black people cannot be racist. At best, they can be prejudiced. Then when they are prejudiced, like sociopaths, they are made prejudice. Why are they made prejudice? Because born racists are the ones that they have to stem off of, or they have to beat off, due to the successive waves or the tidal waves of racism that they continually perpetuate against black people. If you were to scour social media, and heaven forbid you use social media as an arbiter or as a literary tool for absolutely anything, but if you were just to type in the words black racist child, you will not find black racist child. What you'll find is an alarming number of white children exhibiting racist neuroses already. Do you see my point? Do you see my point? I hope my point is somehow becoming clearer as I make more points. And if you want further evidence, even if you weren't to look, I was actually thinking also about the historical context. If you look at history also reverberates that same point I'm making now, that black people cannot be racist. At best, they can be prejudiced because there is no historical records which document black people invading other people's lands. There's none of that. But that's actually adulthood racism I'm talking about. I'm talking about why, from a psychological point of view, a black person cannot be racist. At best, they can be prejudiced. And prejudice usually is a result of having to experience waves of successive abuse themselves, until all you can do in order to protect yourself mentally and physically is make a prejudiced assumption about someone until they disband it. But white people, quite clearly, in terms of what evidence I've put forward in front of you already harbour that neuroses, already harbour that need to subvert other races on the pretext that that race is black and that they're not. Already, early demonstrations are there. You know, you don't need to go to a doctor to say I have full-blown cancer for the doctor to concur. Symptoms will suffice for you to walk into any GP and have him send you off to the nearest CAT scan in order to verify those facts. Symptoms, signs and symptoms are indicative of something of a deeper malaise, and racism in a child as young as 2 years old is a symptom of a much deeper malaise, as a much deeper irrational rationale, which is racism. It seems evident that core within the psyche of white people from day one is that need to lord it over other races on the flimsy pretext that they are white and that you are non-white. And this is clear evidence. This, for me, is clear evidence and backs up my theory as to why black people cannot be racist. At best, they can be prejudiced. I'm not even going to touch on the tentacles, which is what the meaning of the word racism. I mean, the word racism doesn't just espouse hanging people from trees. It also collects within its spectrum the meaning of discrimination on social economic grounds, the discrimination of black people in terms of not being able to get leases to start up businesses or get loans to buy homes. I mean, that is just a bigger severe of racism that we can touch on another time. But I don't have the intellect to or the notes to actually touch on at that moment. But if we extract what racism is in terms of economics and all those other variables, if we extract that and we just look at racism as a germ or a seed that takes root in the minds of people from an early age or from day one, or apparently from the womb, if we look at just that topic, if we address that narrative, then no, black people cannot be racist. At best, prejudiced. And prejudice from black people has no power, not in reality. I mean, you can be prejudiced against people, but then when that prejudice is disbanded because that person has somehow managed to prove that they're not racist or whatever, even that is quite flimsy and can dissipate. Because as we know, black people can be very forgiving of aggressors, of racists. I mean, you see black, sterling, amazing women talking about how they forgive their perpetrators, the people that shot their sons or killed their daughters. But I digress. I hope that I've made a point that makes sense. If not, please feel free to debate with me, black or white actually. Feel free to debate with me on why black people cannot be racist. But that's my argument and I'm sticking to it. I'm One Black British Woman's Voice and I'm out.